Now, I myself am a skeptic, probably like a lot of you guys that are watching this video right now, so I would love to talk about topics like this, and I do love to talk about topics like this, whether it be on YouTube or to anybody else in my life, as I find the paranormal world to be extremely and utterly fascinating, even if it isn't real. I was born a Catholic, and during my early years as a Catholic, I remember having an extreme fascination with Legion and the devil himself, and a lot of the pretext behind those two people or things. So that's kind of where my original likings, if you will, towards the paranormal world started to take place and manifest into what I now like to call my YouTube channel. Now, I used to be an extremely tough Catholic. Like, I used to really believe in God, actually. Like, a lot. There's even documents from when I was younger that would talk about my religion and state that I was extremely and utterly religious, and I could tell you anything from John chapter 13 all the way back to the Old Testament, and I could tell you it for any and every angle. Fortunately, now I can't really do that much, even though I still read the Bible quite a handful amount. So why am I telling you guys my religion and stuff like that? The reason behind that is because I don't want to come off as a person that is trying to push an agenda. I don't want to come off as a person that is trying to push this story to be real. I don't know if it's real, and neither do any of you guys though, which is why I'm telling you guys right now to come into the story with a open the mind and not an immediate this is real or this is completely and utterly fake, because it will depict your entire life then if you do that, and such as for literally everything else you do in life. So without further ado, let's get into the video and let's talk about the story of Annabelle. But first, let's talk about Ed Warren and his wife Lorraine Warren, because in order to talk about the people in the story that are going to be featured, we have to first mention the two main people in the story, and that is of course Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren. During the height of World War II, or the beginning of World War II, Ed Warren was fighting in World War II, and at this point he had had a relationship with Lorraine Warren for a decent time. And after coming back after World War II, while they were both 16, they got married. Somewhere down the line, they also end up having a kid, but I believe it's not too far apart from when they got married. Ed Warren one time opened up about his paranormal thoughts and what he thought about the paranormal world, and shared explicit interests to his wife about it. His wife then mentioned that she was able to actually see halos over people's head, and by having the ability to do that, she could kind of tell if this person was a human or not. There's also many other mentions of her being able to actually hear demons and talk to demons and stuff like that. So now let's get into the full story of Annabelle. In 1970, an old woman decides to give their 28-year-old daughter, particularly young for a woman, a doll. This doll is just a raggedy Annabelle doll. It's a doll that you can give to anybody and really just call it a basic gift 101. But this doll had an unfortunate charm to it, and it was the fact that it might have been possessed, and this was kind of proven through the events that would take place after Donna received the doll. After receiving the doll, her and her roommate would just place the doll in the living room and kind of leave it in there. The doll would start doing weird stuff like falling off the couch every once in a while, or kind of being wobbled while on the couch. Things that me and you could experience when we were younger and kind of just shake off as, well, maybe the window was open and the wind blew it down, or make something scary of it just for the hell of it, but this is something they simply just washed over them. Eventually, after a couple of days pass, they would come home from a ride, and after entering their apartment, something weird would have been taking place by that point. The Annabelle doll was no longer in one stationed spot, and nor did it ever again after this moment stay in one stationed spot. Anywhere they would place it, the doll would literally teleport on the other side of the apartment from. On this particular encounter, the doll was remembered to be on their couch or somewhere around their living room, but instead this doll was actually in one of their bedrooms. Never explicitly mentioned, of course, which bedroom it was in. If it was Donna's bedroom or her roommate's bedroom, all we know is it was in one of their bedrooms. Now, this is kind of impossible, not only because it's impossible for a doll to appear at a certain position and then all of a sudden appear in another position without ever being moved, but the doors were locked. So even a human being could not get through these doors because they would have to unlock the door. And I'm assuming that this door didn't have some kind of pick lock in it too, so this doll couldn't just walk up to it and pick lock the door and put itself in there. So by this point, they obviously do find it pretty weird, but once again, not something worth calling a priest for or a psychic in their opinion. It's only after Donna invites her boyfriend over, stuff starts to get extremely and utterly weird. Anytime the boyfriend is within the presence of the doll, he feels that the doll is watching him, and anytime he goes to sleep in the house of Donna and her roommate, he has nightmares of the doll choking him or doing horrific things to him. On one particular night, he's having a nightmare, and in this nightmare, the doll is climbing up his legs, like running up his legs, and is strangling him. And he just wakes up after this point and tells his girlfriend, Donna, what just happened. When they start to talk about this horrific, in detail nightmare, they start to hear some kind of commotion in their living room, and they decide to enter their living room, even though I would literally never do that. Like in an eternity, I would rather open up my glass window and jump 2 stories down than do that, but I would never even do that in the first place too, so I would probably sit in my room, curled up, and wait for a motherfucker to open the door so I could sock that son of a bitch ass. But no, they don't do that. Instead, they walk into the living room where the doll was last located, and the doll is laying flat on the ground. By this point, the boyfriend of Donna is really out of it. He starts to feel some immense chest pain, and after looking down on what was initially just chest pain, he starts to see a gouging amount of blood and takes off his shirt to see where the blood is stemming from, and it's really just a shitload of scars on his chest, which cannot be explained because he did not get into any kind of fight or anything of that sort before this night and kind of just woke up with it. Now, by this point, they are really just horrified. So they call a psychic, but before calling a psychic, they actually end up seeing these parchment notes that end up being kind of playful, but weirdly playful because of the events that have just taken place to Donna's boyfriend, which is a bunch of scratch marks on his chest, which is not a playful thing and is really just demonic at the highest level. So after discovering these parchment notes, they decide to call a psychic. The psychic makes a pretty thorough evaluation of the situation and assesses that this doll is in fact possessed by a 7-year-old little girl that most likely died in this apartment and is just simply trying to play around with them. Now, of course, this is just not the case. Why would a 7-year-old doll scratch a fully adult man and look at a man literally all the time he enters the apartment in the most vigorous way possible? Like, for example, maybe this man has something that the doll wants, like maybe his body or his soul. This is all more characteristic and into detail with the doll than the doll being a 7-year-old little girl. That simply doesn't make much sense, especially now when we're actually characterizing, adding exemplary situations or circumstances to the story and not just looking at it through the far left window. So obviously, like anybody else would do, they end up trying to look for a second opinion, and in this second opinion they find Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren, which by this time are kind of accomplished paranormal investigators, so of course they invite them over. In the process of doing this, Lorraine and Ed Warren decide to look into the case a little bit more deeply than the psychic did. And they end up kind of piecing together through problematic causes and obviously official circumstances that have taken place at this point that this doll is in fact not a 7-year-old little girl, but most likely a demon that is possessing this doll. And through this, they end up deciding that they should take the doll and case it so it never hurts anybody again. Now that's kind of the end of Annabelle, and that's the real fathomed case of it. But there are 2 stories that happen after Ed Warren and his wife take the doll to their haunted museum with a bunch of haunted artifacts and possessed configurations and dolls. One story is about a biker that rides straight in like the coolest man ever and decides it's a good idea to disrespect a doll that has been possessed and has done some horrible things to its previous owner's boyfriend. Obviously, this is kind of disrupting property too, so Ed Warren just says, yo, get. And he decides to just get. Well, he doesn't decide to, he just gets kicked out and he has to get. On his ride back home, I'm assuming it was back home, I don't actually know if he was going to a store or something like that, but on his ride back home, I'm assuming here, he doesn't make it back. Instead, he dies immediately almost after leaving. Now, as an atheist person, you would probably be like, oh my god, well, that's just horrible, sad. And then, of course, as an agnostic person, you'd probably be like, oh, that is extremely and utterly suspicious. I have to look into this a little bit more. And as a Christian, you'd probably say this is the work of the devil. Another thing I want to talk about is slightly before Ed Warren's death, there was this devil card that was on Annabelle's glass cage. And this devil card was just super weird and suspicious because I don't think Ed actually ever mentioned that he explicitly placed it on Annabelle's cage. But if he did, which I'm not 100% sure if he did or not, it is very weird to why he did that. Maybe that's for some reason enchanted the doll to stay in the cage a little bit longer than it actually could, because you would think that a demon, a powerful demon, would be able to simply break the glass cage, right? But most likely it simply was enchanted to stay in the glass cage through some kind of workings of the Bible or anything else.